Bad Ideas, the show where we look at misfires, mistakes, and miscalculations from all throughout history.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and today's episode is brought to you by our featured patron, Doc Occupant. Tony's going to be telling us about our bad idea this week. Tony, what do you got?
We're going to be talking about Franz Reichelt and his parachute suit. One of the first parachutes that was ever tested, at least in the modern era.
Parachutes, not a bad idea. I think we can go on record right here at the beginning and say, good idea to have parachutes.
And it's not even that he had a bad idea, it was just awful execution.
Well, that can be a bad idea in and of itself, as we have seen several times in the past.
Inventors are often eccentric types that have full faith in their inventions. With bold confidence, they charge into the world of using untested equipment, seeking out fame and fortune. While this can pan out well, sometimes the inventor crashes and burns along with their invention. Or sometimes they crash into the ground under the Eiffel Tower and leave a substantial crater. Franz Reichelt was an Austrian-born tailor who had a bold idea. He wanted to use cloth to slow down and jump enough to survive a fall from great heights. It wasn't quite a parachute as we know them today, but a parachute suit. After doing some research, people have been trying to build a form of parachute since around AD 852. The first was done by a Moor named Furman. He strapped himself to a cloak stiffened with wood and hoped that he would glide from a tower in Cordoba, Spain. Instead of gliding, he sort of made a slow plummet, but this actually did work. He only had minor injuries from the fall, and he was able to escape.
When you say escape, was he like a prisoner, or you're saying escape injury?
He was able to escape injury. Like, there were a few different sources on this, and some said that he was trying to escape the tower, but it was so inconclusive that I didn't really want to, like, imply that he was, like, a full-on prisoner or anything. Like, it was just a little... It's AD 852. Records are a little weird. There would be some attempts at parachutes in the late 1500s, but it wouldn't be until Frenchman Sebastian Lenormand, and I'm going to be messing up a lot of bad French pronunciations here because the language makes no sense to me. He coined the term parachute in 1783. After doing many tests on dummies and animals, he had a prototype. His compatriot Jean-Pierre Blanchard would end up using this device to safely plummet to the earth from a hot air balloon in 1793. It seems like this was the first successful use of a parachute in an emergency situation.
Man, that's one of those things where, like, you've got it in there and you hope you don't need it, and then you need it and you're like, I'm the first guy who's gonna do this, huh?
There were some other types of parachutes that sound incredibly terrifying from this era. In the 1800s, trapeze artists would jump from a balloon with just a trapeze bar connected to canvas, and I'm imagining how much you really have to trust your grip to do acrobatics and even just hold on to that bar as you're descending from the sky. Like this story, the inventor of that particular parachute fell to his death in 1837. A crowd watched as his poorly made, enormous gazebo-looking parachute folded in on itself, and Robert Crocker would fall about 5,000 feet to his death.
Oh, I was thinking we were talking like maybe 500 or 600 feet, Tony. That's a long way to fall.
No, 5,000 feet is enough to actually, like, consider your mortality for a little bit before you hit the ground.
Consider the fact that you built this thing that failed on you. Curse your past self for thinking it was a good idea.
Yeah.
I was bummed out thinking about this, Tony.
This is why, for many decades after this particular incident, parachutes were only used by daredevils and carnival acts. There just wasn't enough consistency in the design and execution and how they worked. I think a lot of it was also just 1800s materials. Like, you didn't have a lot of really good, like, nylons and things that were lightweight but strong and able to kind of do this. And everybody thought you needed, like, a scaffolding until some people decided that you could probably stuff the canvas in, or the, like, a silk-type material into a bag and just kind of let it go. It was an interesting time, like, whenever they were trying to figure this out. Anyway.
Well, it's also way before the development of anything like formal aerodynamics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Wright brothers come along and they build essentially the world's first wind tunnel. Before then, people were just kind of guessing, saying, like, I feel like this would be a good idea. And there's a lot of stuff we know about parachutes now that, man, if you have to figure it out between being 5,000 feet up in a balloon and hitting the ground, it's not a lot of time to learn.
Yeah.
Things like you have to have an opening in the top of the parachute for it to be stable. Otherwise, you're waving way back and forth a lot. Not have to, right? Like, you can make a parachute without an opening in the top, but they figured out eventually that that was really the best way. And then now we have our wing-type parachutes that are very much different than anything they had back then.
Yeah, now you see like a safety record that's extremely high for an activity where you're jumping out of planes. It's surprising that there aren't more accidents with parachutes now. Anyway, back to Franz Reichelt. In 1910, he would use his tailoring skills to create a suit for aviators that wasn't much bulkier than the clothing they normally wear, but would deploy into a parachute in emergency. His first designs actually seemed to work, as dummies thrown from his fifth-floor apartment landed softly. The only problem is, they were way too bulky. They did not fit with that initial design idea of trying to make it so that they weren't bulky. It was about 150 pounds to wear this parachute.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff to wear.
Especially considering in 1910, that's probably the average weight of a human. Like, a normal human male is probably like between 130 and 160, somewhere in that range.
Oh, the days before everybody thought it was a good idea to eat lots and lots of bread.
Yes. After being rejected for this by the Aero Club de France, a group trying to push the technology of flight through dirigibles and eventually fixed-wing craft, France decided it was time to go back to the drawing board. In 1911, a competition by Colonel Lalance put a 10,000 franc bounty on anyone that could safely create a parachute for aviators. Only had a few mandates: that it had to work consistently and that it weighed under 55 pounds. So now, going into this, Franz had an idea of what he needed to be able to build. Reichelt began to change his design philosophy. Instead of heavy fabric and only 65 square feet of fabric, he switched it to a lighter material and used 130 square feet of fabric. As you can imagine, this looked rather silly whenever it was deploying, but if it saved your life, I don't think people would care about that. Being convinced that this would work, Franz took it upon himself to jump from several different heights. La Quest d'Eclair, a French newspaper, reported that in 1911 he had reportedly jumped from a height of about 30 feet in a town called Joinville. The parachute did not deploy, but because he landed in a giant bed of straw, Franz escaped injury. Undeterred, Franz would later alter his design again. He would head to Nogent, France, and jump from a 26-foot-high building. This time the hay didn't keep him entirely safe as he broke his leg upon impact.
So this guy hasn't had one single success yet.
He had those initial successes, supposedly. None of the press or anything saw these first ones that supposedly worked from his apartment, like where he was dropping dummies. But he still claimed that he had those successes with his 150-pound parachute, which doesn't seem...
Well, he must have believed enough to... He starts jumping himself, so one can assume that he believed something worked with the dummies.
That's true. It takes a certain amount of faith in what you're doing to test it by jumping 30 feet off a building. I think that I may have cliff jumped 30 feet once, and it still seemed like it was an impossible height. So to jump over solid ground for that would just be insane.
Yeah, 30 feet. It's not, like when you say you're like, 30 feet, yeah, whatever. But like you get 30 feet up, and you'll probably be, unless you are used to that kind of thing. I'm sure there's stuntmen who can take that kind of a fall and not really be phased, but.
It's 5 times taller than you. Like, that's a substantial drop. Franz was extremely determined and felt that the reason these didn't work was because they did not have enough time to open. While this is a very true thing, it does take a certain amount of space to properly deploy a parachute. He couldn't fathom that it was a design error more than height. To test this hypothesis, Franz asked permission to drop dummies from the Eiffel Tower. He was given permission, and in 2 subsequent tests, the results were inconclusive. The dummies definitely slowed, but it was hard to tell if they would have survived their falls. There were a lot of others testing from the first deck of the Eiffel Tower as well. This was because it was about 187 feet off the ground. It was a nice, stable structure. It was in the middle of France, and you could actually get some people to possibly sponsor you. Like, if you're trying to show off an invention like this is where you'd want to be. People like Gaston Nervaux, who, instead of trying to save the pilot, was actually trying to make a parachute big enough to save an entire crashing aircraft, was doing a lot of his tests from there as well.
You know, it's a great image, right? The idea of, let's go down to the Eiffel Tower and see who's throwing bodies off today.
On a cold Sunday morning in February of 1912, Franz Reichelt was driven to the Eiffel Tower. News teams were waiting for him as he modeled his newest suit. This one was actually very well concealed. You can tell that he was a very skilled tailor in what he was doing. And it made him look like he was a bit chubby, but it did not really restrict his movements. And it had a full 320 square feet of fabric to try to slow you down. and it weighed under 20 pounds. So as far as like getting his design better and better and better, he was doing pretty well with this new one. He had it all within the specializations of the Aero Club, and he was confident that this was going to be the suit that worked.
So can you describe to me, because I know where we're going here, but like you said, it made him look chubby. It's not a backpack kind of a thing like you would think now. What exactly is this design visually? Can you describe it for those of the people who are audio only? I assume there will be maybe a visual on the YouTube side.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be
thumbnail.
There's definitely going to be a visual there, but it's a combination where it's a suit that whenever you stretch your arms open, opens up and basically gives you like a wingsuit type thing, along with a backpack that deploys and gives you that full like normal parachute look. I'm sending you a picture now so you can see if I've missed anything with the design. It is in the Discord.
Okay, well, I don't know what it looks like open, but first off, he's wearing one of those hats, and his mustache is on point.
Yeah,
everybody should know.
It looks like Mario.
I don't know how the mustache didn't save him, Tony.
Yeah, the mustache should have lowered his wind resistance by quite a lot. And I've got a picture here of what it looks like whenever it's actually open for you.
Should have just aimed that thing right for the ground. It would have cushioned his fall.
I mean, he looks substantially like Mario in that first picture. Like, if you were to colorize that in the right ways, you could totally make that look like just a standard Mario.
He so does. And then he jumped, man.
And then he jumped. Mario had extra
I have
lines
to
for
say,
dealing
I'm
with
looking
it.
at the second picture where he has it all open, and it looks complicated.
Yeah.
It looks like there's a lot of things that have to open and go exactly right for this to design to work.
That's why he kept thinking, oh, there's just not enough space for this deploy. And it was probably right in that sense, is that unless you have like a ripcord that's going to open things immediately and all that, it's going to take a few seconds for you to actually open your arms, get this to start catching air, then get it to grab the air and everything else. But we also don't know what type of stability this thing would have had. It's just not the design that people needed. He was very set on getting that one design where pilots would wear this as their outfit instead of like just working on a working parachute first.
Yeah, the cables or ribbons or whatever it is that's actually connecting him to the parachute, I don't know exactly how it failed in the end, Tony, but I see a high probability for tangling here personally.
Yeah, not to mention that the canopy for that parachute is about 16 feet tall. So it's like you've got a very, very long chute that can wrap itself up while it's trying to deploy. News crews reported on how all Franz had to do to open the chute and canopy would be to open his arms during the free fall. 30 people from news agencies actually gathered to watch this particular event. Police had gathered as well to make sure that everything was above board. They cordoned off a small landing area to make sure nobody got landed on. And Franz had gotten permission from the police only on the basis that they would be using a dummy. The prefect of police was very insistent on this. Still, the officers simply stood by.
So he shows up with the thing on, but he's like, "No, guys, I'm gonna use. I'll put it on the dummy when I get up there."
No, like he just didn't like really say anything about it. He just went up there. He was telling his friends he was going to do it. Okay. Basically, he was just telling people that he was going to do it, and like the cops weren't really stopping him. Upon the first tier of the Eiffel Tower, it became apparent that Franz intended to jump instead of using the dummy. His friends pleaded with him, saying that the wind was too strong, that it was untested. La Petite Journal asked him why he wouldn't be using a safety rope or anything else in this endeavor, and he replied, "I want to try the experiment myself and without trickery, as I intend to prove the worth of my invention."
Man, like, on the first try, though, my dude?
Yeah.
Like, could you prove it after, like, you did it, like, 20 times with the rope or, like, a big pile of hay at the bottom?
Yeah, not to mention, if you have the dummy and it works, you could do it probably, like, 5 times in a day before the cops are like, you know what, like, we're tired of standing around. Just get your stuff and go.
He didn't want to have to haul that mustache up all those stairs 5 times. He got up there once and he was like, whew, not doing that again.
At least he probably packed a lunch in the mustache.
It's only funny because it's been like 100 years.
Inventor Gaston Arvaux pleaded with Franz, saying that there still wasn't enough space for this jump to deploy the chute, and offered as much technical advice as he could give. Franz was still undeterred. Franz's initial attempt to ascend the first stage of the tower was blocked by a guard named Gaston. who had witnessed previous unsuccessful dummy drops and feared that Reichelt's attempt would end in disaster. Despite the guards' resistance, by 8 a.m. the matter had been resolved. Reichelt was visibly shaken by this argument with the guard, but he was still determined to mount the tower. He climbed the tower with his 2 friends and a cinematographer. One was stationed at the top of the tower and one was stationed at the bottom to catch this.
Oh, no.
As he climbed the stairs, he paused, turned back to the crowd, raised his hand, and wished them a cheery "A bientôt," which I think means "I'll see you later." And also, if you are wondering, yes, you can very much go to YouTube right now and watch what happens next.
I know. I was just, like you said, there's cinematographers, and I thought, like, this is, you know, like when the guys hired the people to film them shooting the emus in Australia, like, I wanted that footage real bad and I couldn't find it. And now this person kills himself like an idiot after being warned by 20 people, hey dude, maybe don't do this. And we get to watch that on YouTube. Thanks, Watch People Die. Reddit.com.
At 8:22, Franz Reichelt stood on a chair overlooking France. He stared past the Seine River with a smile on his face, and he dove from the tower. His parachute only half opened, the rest folded around Franz. In an instant, he crashed into the frozen turf beneath the tower. His legs were broken, as was his spine and skull. According to onlookers, he was dead on impact, although they still rushed his body to a hospital. His fall left a 6-inch deep crater, which you can also see in the video.
It's not a good time for this dude.
No, it definitely was not.
I'm just bummed out, man. It's such a bad look. I've actually got open right here in front of me a view from the top of the Eiffel Tower. I don't know where he's jumping from, but I'm just imagining his sort of assumption that he's going to be fine. It looks like there's a little grassy area you could probably jump towards if you want to do this kind of thing, and he's all set and everybody's looking up, and it just... man.
Yeah. It was just unfortunate from start to end there. Franz couldn't have known it at the time, but across the Atlantic 4 days prior to his jump, an American steeplejack named Frederick R. Law. A steeplejack is somebody who climbs buildings and does construction type stuff on the outside, chimneys, that sort of stuff. And he just jumped from the flame of the Statue of Liberty and survived using his parachute. Scientific journals attribute this success to every American being more capable of flight because of freedom and bald eagles. Citation needed.
It does add the extra level of tragedy, though. Not only does he die, somebody else succeeds ahead of him, and the somebody else who succeeds is American.
And he jumped off of a French-made, tower.
Oh, I forgot about that! The irony just twists a little more with the knife of irony. Well, you know what? He was dead, so he didn't care.
Yeah, well, this happened before he died, but I don't think it got to him yet.
Right, he didn't know, though. I'm saying, putting it all together in your head just makes it that much worse.
And there are a lot of bad ideas here. I love inventors. I love the brashness. I love that they're out there trying to make just awesome things that improve life. But you gotta test things, man. You really, really gotta test things properly whenever you're talking about, life-saving things. This isn't like one of the guys who founded the Segway who just crashed on it. This isn't like some of these other inventions where, people were put through it because, kings were cruel. This was just him solely not testing an invention because he had so much faith that it was going to work, despite mountains of evidence that it hadn't worked before. Whenever you throw a dummy off there and you're questioning, would that have survived? You don't take that jump.
Yeah, at the very least, you hire somebody else to do it,
yeah.
Right? Be that jerk and have somebody else kill themselves.
Yeah, totally. It's just a sponsorship. It's like 1912. They probably wouldn't have even, charged you liability for that.
And I would like to add, another bad idea here is ignoring the advice of others. I know that there's sort of this romantic idea about ignore other people and blaze your own path, but
hashtag live your best life.
There's some truth to if a bunch of people tell you something's a bad idea, they might be right, you know?
I mean, this is the inverse of if all of your friends jumped off a bridge, would you follow them?
Right, all of your friends are like, no, my dude, Don't jump off the bridge.
And there were some people that were saying like maybe he was just suicidal beforehand. None of that really pans out according to the newspapers. He was known as like the Mad Tailor and just all these other things. He was just a very like excitable guy that thought he had something and really wanted to rush it to make sure that he would be able to get a prize, that he would get these sponsors. And I admire the brashness, but I don't admire how dumb he was for just diving off. And so that is our bad idea for this week. If you guys have other bad ideas about early inventions, these are some of my favorite topics to research, as tragic as they might be. Please put them in the comments or tweet us at Human Echoes. And also, if you really enjoy this, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Human Echoes. We have some awesome new stickers for certain tiers. Some of those include like the Bad Ideas light bulb. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming out there.
We'll see you guys next time. Don't forget to watch out for things that have infinite downside and very little upside. Because that's what this is. Like, literally, like, if fail small and win big.
Yes.
Not the other way around.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.